Hi, this is Rich being AC. It's a rare rainy day in Phoenix. Oh well, that means it must be time to look at the car's brakes. So this is my daughter's Corolla, which now has 140,000 miles on. I believe these are the original brake shoes. She bought the car used at 30,000 miles. When I checked them last at 110, they were a little over half worn. So today we're going to see how worn they are, because I thought I heard the brake squealer on just the other day. There's a couple of places to look without taking the caliper off, and one of them is right down. It's kind of hard to see. I'll just take the caliper off, it'll be easier to see. There's one spot here where you can see how thick the pad is, right about where my finger is. The other one's round here through this little access hole. Hard to see. We can see the inside pad. But I'll pull this up. Pull the caliper up and we'll have a look. So I've used a bungee. I took the bottom bolt out of the caliper, which is down there. And I'm using a bungee wrapped around all this, just to hold it back. I'll have a look at the pads, which are both on the disc here. So they still have pretty good thickness. So here I am taking out the outboard pad, which is a bit thicker, which kind of indicates that the it's a bit troublesome coming out. Indicates the pins, it's not sliding as well on these pins. There's a pin inside that rubber boot and another one at the top. They do have some grease, I'll probably grease them. There's one coming out. I'll leave that there, so it's the same way round, and I'll take the other one out. I'm going to need both hands for that. So these are both pads. They seem to have a lot of material left. I'm going to put them on the bench and measure them. But the squealers at the ends, I guess each one has a squealer, is pretty useless. That pad material is going to have to be almost all the way gone before they would be effective. They're almost flush with the surface. These are the OEM pads. So using the depth feature on my vernier caliper, I'll just put it on, push it down, and measure it off. I've got the following result. As you can see, the inner one is a bit tapered towards the back, as you can see by eye, and the squealer is pretty useless at less than 1 millimeter. So this is the bottom pin as it came out, like with most of the old grease off. They were fairly movable in there. They came in and out fairly easily. I'm using this brake lubricant back on here. It's a grease that's specially designed for the rubber, so it should work. As I said, I put the top one in already. That's this one. It does move fairly easily. The bottom one, you just slide in. You just pull them out when you're taking them out. Slides in. Rubber pops on. Pulls a bit of a vacuum, so I'm going to use my finger here to release the vacuum a bit. So there's a bit of air in there, and you can see it moves nice and easily now. Getting the pads back in can be a little tricky, but if you get one end in first, you've got to place the pad inside. Put the bottom one in, you may have to wedge these anti-rattle springs apart, and then the second one you put the top in, and it should just push in like that. And I am putting these pads back on because they're good to go. And you just slide the caliper back over, put the bolts back in. There's 25 foot-pounds of torque, 76 foot-pounds for the axle studs. Done. Okay, so I'm going to check the rear brake now. The first thing you want to check is how far the handbrake pulls up. Pulling up the handbrake. Okay, that feels pretty good. 4 clicks. Yep, that's pretty good. So if the handbrake pulls up a long way, like between 6 and 9 clicks, it means your auto adjusters are not adjusting the rear drum brakes, which this car has. They're not adjusting the rear drum brakes properly. And probably need to replace the auto adjusters. Yeah, she had 2 tires replaced over the summer, not by me, so I'm going to run a check balance on all the tires. This is my little rig. It's a workmate with a hub. That's the right size hub, and I put the wheel on and do a vertical balance, vertical static balance. Yep, this tire looks good. It's one I did because I found a bit of blue tape on there marking the heavy spot, and yeah, it's working well. Okay, so this is wheel number 2, it came off the back, and I noticed that it is moving on its own, so I'm going to find the heavy spot, and I have to put a weight on there. I did notice that there is one weight on the inside, the other side of the wheel, and there's nothing on this side, so it could be that the outside weight's fallen off. And a quick visual inspection of the rear brake. Looking at the shoe thickness, and it looks pretty good all the way around. It looks very even, which is always a good clue it's wearing properly. There's not a lot of debris in here. I will give it a little bang out. One other thing to note is coating this surface with grease makes getting it off much easier. Thank you, Mr. Trash Man. Always good to know you're there picking up rubbish. Okay, so you can see it's got grease all over here. It doesn't get on the brakes, but it allows you to pull this off easily because it doesn't rust on. So I've got 3.5 and 4.5 millimeters. 3.5 millimeters measuring there, and the same place on the back. Right there. Drum itself is in very good nick. There's a very, very slightest of ridges on the outside and the inside, but it's in really good nick, so it's going back on. Nothing wrong here. And just for completeness, left rear, boringly excellent. 4 millimeters front, 4.5 rear. So lots of life left. No ridges on the drum. So this is on the balancing rig. This is the 3rd tire. I was really surprised at the size of the weight. That's a 40-gram weight. There's another one on the inside of the wheel, and it balances. It's round, so when I spin it, there's no sudden bulges, there's no eggs, no nothing. That's just how they put the tire on. I'm thinking they mated up the light and heavy spot wrong. So this is probably the discount tires one. Just finishing up here, did the left front as well. Left rear is good. Left front, even better. I mean, these are barely worn at all. I can't remember if it's 10 or 12 millimeters is the starting value for pad thickness. But 140,000 miles, this is a really good result. Grease the pins on this one too. I'd say that's working out well. Good old Corolla.